All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon regarding the state of digitization in freight forwarding, meeting shipper expectations, and delivering value. We're so happy to go ahead and have you here today. Now, before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items that we wanted to go ahead and go over. First and foremost, everyone is walking away with the door prize today. It is a recording of the webinar. You're welcome. Also, we will have a Q&A portion later on during the webinar. Please go ahead and send us your questions through the Q&A panel. You'll notice that at the bottom of your screen. And then also check out the resources for valuable content. So go ahead and take a look at that. With that being said, let's go ahead and let's dive in. Now, before we get into the deep stuff, let's level set and contextualize everything that you're about to go ahead and hear. So last month, Adelante SCM and Magaya released a report. And here are a couple of the key items that we found. In 2025, there was a disconnect between shippers' expectations for advanced technology and what the vast majority of forwarders currently deliver. Now, the disconnect isn't just a tech issue, it's a service and competitiveness issue as well. So, forwarders who fail to bridge this gap risk falling short of customer expectations and losing business to more digitally agile competitors. In other words, doing nothing officially has a price tag. And here's another wake up call. These two statistics that you see on here. Um, Only 23% of freight forwarders have digitized 75% or more of their business processes. And add to that, 38% or nearly 4 out of 10 shippers are feeling underwhelmed by their forwarders' tech capabilities. This is a huge red flag. So it's pretty loud and clear that the industry is trailing behind in digital transformation. And this is especially poignant thinking about in a world where efficiency, speed, and data-driven decisions are key. Staying manual isn't just inefficient, it's literally a competitive disadvantage. Here's a quote that I wanted to go ahead and share as we're going through, and I'm going to read it. It's digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to fundamentally change how a business operates, delivers value to its customers, and competes in the market. It goes just beyond adopting new tools. It involves rethinking processes, culture, and customer experiences to drive innovation and efficiency. So, in other words, digital transformation isn't just about swapping old tools for new ones. That's all well and good, but it's about a complete paradigm kind of mindset shift. Um, it really challenges businesses to rethink how they operate and how they serve customers in order to stay competitive in today's market, especially with all the changes that happen day to day, rapid fire. So now that we've level set and we've set the stage for how the industry currently operates, I want to go ahead and take a moment to present my fellow speakers. Now, both these gentlemen are thought leaders in our industry, and I'm truly excited about diving into the findings of this report and the conversations that we're about to have. First up, we have Adrian Gonzalez. He is the president of Adelante SCM. And go ahead and say hi, Adrian.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's certainly a pleasure to be here with you all today.
Yeah, likewise, we're happy to have you, and thank you so much for authoring this report. Now, there was one thing that I did want to ask you, Adrian, before I move over to Gus. Adelante, Spanish word for moving forward. Why did you choose that? I mean, I've always wanted to know, so I guess this is the moment to do it.
Yeah, no, good question. Well, I speak Spanish. I'm first generation American of Cuban heritage.
Nice.
So when I launched Adelante more than 14 years ago and was trying to think about how to, a name for it, one of the things I wanted to do with the company is really drive the industry forward by creating a community where supply chain logistics executives from different industries can learn from one another and network with one another. So anyway, as I was thinking about it, that Spanish word popped into my head, and I said, okay, that's what we're gonna go with.
There you go. And especially let's move adelante then with this webinar. Thank you, Adrian, for sharing that. Now, next we have Gus, Gustavo Gomez, or Gus as we lovingly call him here at Magaya. He's the senior logistics management consultant. And Gus, go ahead and say hi to all of our attendees that are joining us.
Hey, Alfred. Hi, everyone. It's great to see everyone today. Excited about this topic. Excited about the communication that we'll have with Adrian.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss, Gus. So I went ahead and asked Adrian a question about Adelante. But with you, I'm actually going to share an anecdote. I don't think most of the people here know you personally, but I have to mention that Gus is a fantastic singer. That is one of the key traits. Aside from the fact that he is a marvel when it comes to the logistics industry, that man can outsing the greatest pop star out there. So there you go, Gus. I just threw you.
Thank you, Alfred.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's dive into the results of the report. And we have one question, and I'm going to ask both of you throughout this webinar. What surprised you most about the research results? And here we actually have a graph that's attached to this question. Um, and it's really about what types of software applications do you currently use, and we have them listed there. And I want to contextualize this as well. So if you take a look, this is what software applications freight forwarders actually use nowadays. All the way at the top, those are the ones that are using it the most, like warehouse management systems. And then all the way at the bottom, you have digital freight platforms, marketplaces, and those are the ones that people are using the least. So aside with these results that you see on your screen, Adrian, when you were compiling all this data and information across everyone you asked, did any of this surprise you?
Yeah, no, great question. Well, first, let me just say, it's great to be part of this panel. I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the research results and my take on it. I'm certainly looking forward to get Gus's perspective and your perspective as well in terms of what the research uncovered. I mean, the industry has been talking about digitization now for for a long time, and while there's certainly been a lot of progress in some areas, I think overall what the research showed is that there's still a lot more work, to be done. So to me, there was there were a lot of surprising results. I mean, the stats that you mentioned earlier, Alfred, are how only 23% of freight forwarders have digitized 75% or more of their business processes, for example. I mean, that was a bit surprising. I would have expected that to be, that percentage to be a little bit higher, by now. But I guess if I had to pick, one thing that was that rose to the top for me in terms of surprising, is how relatively few of the freight forwarders we surveyed, only 23%, are using real-time freight visibility solutions. So you can see that there in the slide, near the bottom, real-time freight visibility, 23%. And the same for business intelligence and analytics. I mean, I would have expected those two solutions to be much higher on the list. I mean, I think the ability for freight forwarders to quickly and accurately answer the most common questions, right, that customers always ask, right? Where's my order? Where's my shipment? When will it arrive? It's really table stakes today in many ways. So, in fact, when we asked shippers as part of the research, which technological capabilities offered by freight forwarders and third-party logistics providers do you find, most valuable? Real-time shipping tracking, top the list with over 67% of the respondents selecting it. So, when you see this gap between, real-time shipment tracking topping the list for shippers, but real-time freight visibility, being near the bottom of the list for, freight forwarders in terms of the systems that they're using, um, I think this helps explain why, as you highlighted, Alfred, only 38% of the shippers surveyed are only slightly or not at all satisfied with the technological capabilities of their freight forwarders. Um, Now there are different ways to enable freight visibility, and some ways are more real time than others. But the research suggests to me that many freight forwarders are still laggards in this area, and the same is true I think with business intelligence and analytics. I mean, one of the key lessons, that certainly after the pandemic for companies of all industries is kind of the need to be more data driven in
Right.
their decision making, and BI and analytics certainly plays a key role here. So I think for me, if I had to pick one thing, it's kind of that, because I think it particularly because it ties into the customer satisfaction piece.
And you know what's funny about that? I wholeheartedly agree with the BI and the analytics portion of it, only because you know the old saying that goes, "You don't know what you don't know," and BI and analytics would pretty much just put a magnifying glass into everything that's going on in your operations. But for me, it was the customer portal one, and I don't know if I had any of my personal biases because I come from the age of like the Uber Amazon effect, where I just want all that data information in front of me all times, readily available. And I'm also the type of person that if you tell me that I have to call a phone number, I'm just not doing it. I'd much rather go and hunt myself, go look for the data, go look for the information myself in a customer portal than having to go ahead and interact with customer service. So that one was pretty surprising to me. Gus, what did you think?
Well, Alfred, I agree with Adrian, but I would like to add that the customer portal is a key component for that like end-to-end visibility, right? Um, I think one without the other, it's helpful, but whenever you put them together, it's a huge game changer for the customer, and it's a game changer for the actual freight forwarder, because we need to understand that every time that you, like you mentioned, like you avoid a phone call because you're giving 24/7 visibility to your final customer, is saving your time, allowing you to focus on what you do best, right? So I agree. Like at the end of the day, visibility is becoming more and more crucial. We are living in very volatile times. We have port strikes. Then we went through the, Red Sea crisis. Everything is changing. As everybody knows, like logistics is a constant living entity. There's no like a replicate day, like so that will allow you to be on top of what you're doing, allowing your customers to have visibility of what's happening. One thing that I like to point out in this is uh, everything links to the data we get from the carriers, right? So that real-time visibility, it's always linked to a third party.
Perfect. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then you're always going to have you're depending on that information being updated. So that was a good takeaway from that. I actually wanted to pivot quickly because when we sent out the invitation for the webinar and a lot of our attendees, we absolutely blasted the entire gamut of what you can imagine in terms of size for freight forwarders. And you know what's funny? The survey results, if you notice on point number 2, they showed that there are some notable differences in the driving forces and the priorities and the challenges between larger freight forwarders and smaller ones when it comes to digitization. So what and again, what are some of the examples that you've seen for this? And there's actually a graph as well, Adrian, that I wanted to talk about, and it shows the delta in between the difference between the large freight forwarders and the small freight forwarders. If we can move the slide forward. Yeah, so we're talking about the differences between those two. Let's. Did you think that the delta between those two would be wider, narrower, um, in the graph that's coming up right after this?
Are you asking me, Alfred, or
Yeah, I'm
Gus?
sorry. I was going into for you, Adrian.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just quickly, so it's a great question. I'm just going to quickly just add to what Gus said before about the visibility piece, which I think is a critical point. One of the critical um, uh, requirements for real-time visibility is data quality and data quality management, right? So it's a classic garbage in, garbage out. So I think that's an area that we didn't really explore in the research, but it's certainly a critical aspect of enabling visibility is making sure that you've got the right connections in place with all of the stakeholders that you need to draw data from, and that data is coming in a timely, accurate, and complete manner related to what you're looking for and your customers are looking for. So I think that's an element that we didn't really explore much in the research, but I think it's a critical cornerstone of anytime we talk about visibility is data quality management. Now, with regards to kind of differences between large and small companies, I mean, I think overall the main drivers for digitization were the same for large and small, freight forwarders. I mean, it was to improve productivity and efficiency, to improve customer satisfaction, and to improve operational costs. So I think that there were some commonalities there between large and small ones. But if you look at some of the other driving forces, that's where we saw some of the big differences between small and large freight forwarders. So, for example, if you look at this chart here, if you look at to improve end-to-end shipment visibility, 78% of large and very large freight forwarders selected that as a driving force for digitization compared to only 38% of small, freight forwarders. And then similarly, 56% of large and very large freight forwarders selected to become more data driven in decision making as a driving force for digitization, while only 33% of small freight forwarders selected it. So if you go back to what I was saying before, and when we were talking about visibility, about real time freight visibility and business intelligence analytics, I mean, the results to this questions indicate that it's smaller freight forwarders that are lagging the most in these areas. Um, on the flip side, in contrast, a larger percentage of small freight forwarders selected to keep up with the competition as a driving force for digitization compared to large and very large freight forwarders. So if you look at the chart here, 43% compared to 22%. So of course, not all freight forwarders, not all small freight forwarders are the same, and not all large and very large freight forwarders are the same. But I think in general, I think the nice thing about the state of technology today, such as the availability of more affordable and easier to deploy, cloud solutions, cloud application, is that it helps smaller freight forwarders level the playing field, if you will, with their larger competitors. But they also they're also more constrained from a resource and budget perspective compared to the larger players. So they can only work, right on so many things at once because of those constraints. But on the flip side, larger freight forwarders have to compete beyond, operational excellence, right? So they have to differentiate themselves in other ways, such as competing on customer experience, for example. So for them, it's not about keeping up with the competition. It's more about looking for ways to stand out from the pack, right? Stand out from the competition. So, to me, my take is that at the end of the day, both small and large freight forwarders need to really focus their time, money, and resources in ways that not only align with their internal objectives, but also with the expectations of their customers.
And taking a look at this graph, Adrian, the one thing that stood out to me, especially considering where a lot of smaller freight forwarders, and I'm talking about the small guys right now, it's when they're trying to say they're clearly trying to keep up with the competition because that's a huge difference between the larger and the smaller one, but they're also trying to reduce operational costs as well. So in other words, this is the old adage of trying to do more with less, and it seems like more and more smaller freight forwarders have to do more with less money. The thing that was I kind of think like a sigh of relief or kind of confirmed my suspicions is, freight forwarding is very much a customer game and they both want to improve customer satisfaction. So at the end of the day, if you have a happy customer, you have a successful freight forwarder. And it's good to see that the delta between the large and the small, that seems to be the one that has the narrowest margin between the two. So that was interesting. But yeah, the improving the end-to-end shipment visibility, that's a huge delta between the
Right.
small.
And it ties into, I mean, I think as we've already talked about, I mean, to improve end-to-end supply chain visibility really is linked to improve customer satisfaction because that's what customers are, that's kind of like one of the top expectations of the shipper customers is to have that real-time visibility and shipment tracking, right? So I think those two metrics are those two driving forces are really linked, or they should be viewed as complementary to each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Gus, did you have anything that you wanted to add on this slide specifically? I know that when it comes to Magaya, at least, we run the gamut as well. We run from as small as one license freight forwarders all the way to enterprise, huge levels. Is there something that you've seen that correlates with the graph that you're seeing on screen?
Absolutely, Alfred. On our day-to-day, meetings with forwarders that are looking to improve their operations, you notice that definitely the smaller companies uh, are looking for ways to, like you say, do more with less.
Right.
And this is going to be, like linked to our previous slide, like the fact that they're going to be able to provide more visibility with less people involved into that process, right? So the way we like to present it to them as consultants is like, once you acquire the right technology and you add your personal touch, you will be able to have a differentiator that will allow you to compete, because smaller freight forwarders are competing with a lot of smaller freight forwarders
They're
that,
everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, that in comparison with the large ones have like a fair share of the market. So the small ones cannot compete, with pricing as the large ones can offer like bigger volumes. So at the end of the day, it makes sense. The graph is I'm impressed how accurate it is with what we see every day whenever we talk to real forwarders on day-to-day basis.
And that's great because you guys are the boots on the ground. So you would see this, and Adrian, you've seen this through all the years that you've been working with Adelante. So it's just further cementing some of these findings. Now, point number three, as part of this year's research, shippers were surveyed to get their perspective on the technological capabilities of the freight forwarders and logistics service providers. And I know that when I first read the report, this statistic was especially eye-opening from me. So let's go ahead and let's dive into what it is that they actually said. So what did this voice of customer research reveal? And the question was this one: how satisfied are you with the technological capabilities of your current freight forwarders slash 3PLs? Um, I think that this is one of the most important slides, and I'll give my perspective before I allow you guys to jump in, because this is where the opportunity lives. The gap between the expectations that your customers have and the delivery is where the forwarder can really shine. But I don't want to go off on that. Were you guys surprised with these results, or did they meet your expectations? What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was a bit surprising. I mean, I expected, a higher percentage of the respondents to either be, to be more satisfied, if you will. Um, I mean, in all the years I've been doing research around satisfaction with the technological capabilities of 3PLs, freight forwarders, et cetera, customers are never fully satisfied. So from that
Right.
standpoint, from that standpoint, it wasn't surprising. But if you look, I mean, none of the respondents, at least within the universe of the customers that we surveyed, none of them were said that they were extremely satisfied with the results, and only 14% were very satisfied. And plurality of the respondents, 48%, said that they were moderately satisfied. So my key takeaway here is that there's certainly a lot of room for improvement. But what I really liked was we asked them also to provide some qualitative comments. And I think the qualitative comments that were submitted provide shed additional light on in terms of their perspective. So I'm just going to read a couple here
Yeah.
that I picked out that I think are provide some insight. So here's the first quote. I think many logistics service providers haven't been moving in the direction of digital freight forwarders. They are not developing the technology that companies are looking for in their freight forwarders. You need strong digital platforms with robust reporting and communication tools, integration with ERPs and other supply chain solutions, and be nimble enough to work with many different technologies. So when I look at that comment, I mean, certain words or phrases, jump out at me. Robust reporting and communication tools. And I think it's a combination of both, right? It's a combination of what Gus, you were talking about before, these customer portals, right? Self-service, being able to really to get into the data that you're interested in. But I think historically that has been more about backwards looking, right? What happened this past week? What happened this past month? Things like that. Um, customers are also expecting more of the real-time information, more of the forward visibility into what's happening with their shipments, with their supply chain networks, and so forth. So I think it's a combination of both. Integration, right? Integration is critical, right? So it's not about. I think this is where the customer portals have their role and place and importance, but
Right.
but what customers are also looking for is that system to system integration, where that data is flowing right into their own systems, whether it's their ERP system for financials and other business processes at their end, or into their own transportation management systems, or other enterprise systems that they have, right? So it's to have that strong integration, whether it's via EDI or APIs or things of that nature. And then I think the other key word for me here was nimble, right? It's the fact that, hey, when we start working today, this is the operating reality that we're in. This is kind of our current requirements and so forth. But we all know, and we've certainly seen a lot of change since the beginning of the year and the new administration, and a lot of changes going on with tariffs and the de minimis and all this stuff, right? The supply chains change, requirements change, everything changed. So is your freight forwarding partner, your 3PL partner, nimble enough to respond to these emerging and new requirements? And a lot of times, those new and emerging requirements require changes to to data requirements, perhaps require some new technological capabilities to facilitate and automate them. So I think that's a key thing that I think a lot of customers are looking for. And quickly, I'll read the other quote. We work with two different forwarders for ocean freight. Neither of them offers all the technology offered by the other companies. Every freight forwarder 3PL should have a system that provides GPS tracking and sends regular reports. We shouldn't have to beg for real-time data. If it's automatic, then I don't have to do the work for them and have a better use of my time doing my job, not theirs. So,
Hmm.
Alpha, you mentioned earlier, right? You rather either self-service
Right.
or you want that proactively sent to you rather than you trying to, pester the freight forwarder. Can I have this data? Can I have this information? When are you going to send me the report? Can I have can you update the dashboard so I can see this on my own, so on and so forth. So I think, this need, again, going back to the real-time visibility and the fact that customers want this either proactively sent to them automatically or have them be able to self-service themselves to get this visibility that they're looking for.
It's very much the teach a man to fish kind of mentality, because if they're able to go ahead and get it, think of the amount of reduction of time that helps with. Because if you have to then have an email exchange explaining what's going on back and forth, and going back, pivoting back for a second, the whole thing about being nimble is extremely important. We're seeing changes right now daily within the world of freight forwarding. And if your software partner isn't nimble enough, can't act on the fly, then trust me, your competitors will go ahead and take advantage of that. Gus, what did you want to chime in on this with?
Well, just to add on that, the last quote, that expectation, I believe like setting expectations right for for the customers, it's very important, right? Like I'm not surprised with there's nobody extremely satisfied. I see this every day. And the problem is like we live in a, like you mentioned, I think we live in the uberization, if that's a word, like where we expect everything to be like in a
Instant.
snap of a finger instantly. And we need to understand like there's so many pieces that we need to bring in together to provide that real-time visibility. The other thing is like, yes, I agree. If everything can be controlled through a GPS and that information goes automatically into an ERP, it's great. However, sometimes they say careful what you wish for. We have done that many times, and sometimes the events that are pulling back into that process, the customer doesn't want to go directly to their final, like the final user. So like we go through all this process on where we need to really map what they want, and there's like this huge we call it like a wish list or like a unicorn that like that's what you see, that there is only like, well, 48% is moderately satisfied. So I think that's where everybody is, because everybody needs to adapt to what the industry is able to offer regarding technology. Here in Magaya, I'm proud to say, like, we have Magaya Connect that expedites that connection to different softwares, different ERPs, accounting systems, right? But there is a process, and that process takes time. And sometimes when people reach out to us is because they're a couple years already too late, and they want to expedite a process that, to be fair, if you want to do it right, we need to take time to develop the correct process.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Gustavo. I mean, I think what I've seen in general, and this is true for any kind of software implementation, is the most critical part of it is before you even do any kind of, before you even begin the implementation, perhaps even before you even begin doing the due diligence to find the right partner, is really the more clearly defining your objectives and your data requirements and integration requirements. Because that then, if you do all of that due diligence and homework up front, it's just going to simplify everything else at the back end. If you try to come in, like you said, 2 years, someone that's been struggling for 2 years later, maybe they didn't define their requirements very effectively. Maybe they didn't fully understand all the integration requirements that they had. Now you're trying to do it after the fact. It's much more difficult, much more costly, much more time consuming.
And that's something that we've seen, especially in the realm of software. And it's funny because I know that I mentioned it during one of our run throughs is in our industry, we've seen very much before it used to be FOMO, the fear of missing out. Like there's a new exciting technology, everyone's jumping on it, trying to get it implemented as quickly as possible. And that's kind of changed in people's minds now. It's kind of now, FOMO, which is the fear of messing up. And that's why they do a lot more due diligence to find a partner that can actually do what it is that they need to do. And it's very interesting how it correlates to the information that we're seeing on here. It moving, and I wanted to move on to point number 4, which is quite possibly, and I'm not trying to be partial, but I think my favorite slide in the entire deck. And it's only because AI is just everywhere. It's a buzzword. You hear it on the news and the TV, on the radio, everywhere. It's now built into our cell phones. But it seems like one of the industries where AI is still kind of lagging or still not being adopted is in freight forwarding. Um, what most people, I'd say, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, they thought that AI, some people thought that it was just going to be a flash in the pan, kind of like a fad, and it's literally become ubiquitous. We use it more, a lot of people use it daily, and it's becoming more and more commonplace. But let's go ahead and let's break down where AI is making waves in the industry and where there's still untapped potential. So, this first slide that you're taking a look here, the question was, how likely is your organization to invest in artificial intelligence or machine learning to enhance operational capabilities in 2025? Now, the large freight forwarders, it's huge. 68% of them are saying, yes, we are fully on board with the AI machine learning bandwagon. We're going to go ahead and very or somewhat likely implement that data. And then that margin between large and small, it's huge. And then when it comes to the smaller freight forwarders, they're somewhat or very unlikely. What do you think of that, Adrian, when you were compiling this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very interesting. You're right. I mean, AI is been on the spotlight now for a couple of years. I mean, I want to take a step back first and just say, even though there's so much buzz and hype around AI today, it's really not new. I mean, AI is a very broad term. It's actually been around if you really look at the various dimensions of what's involved with AI. It's been around for, 60, 70, 80 years, right? And a lot of the optimization solutions, things like machine learning, which is part of the AI umbrella, have been around for a long time. So the fact is, most companies are already using AI, and they've been using it, for quite some time. I think why it's gotten so much attention lately, particularly in the last 2 years, has been with the introduction of ChatGPT,
Right.
because that introduced it to the masses, and then that's the whole generative AI, like a different flavor of it now, right? And I think that's what's, generating a lot of attention. So the bottom line is, I think, for a lot of, freight forwarders are really in the same place where, many companies in other industries are today, and that's, they're trying to separate the hype, from the reality, and trying to, figure out where does it make the most sense to, invest into particularly some of these newer AI capabilities within their operations. So as you pointed out, I mean, overall, 18% of the respondents are very likely to invest in AI in 2025, and 33% are somewhat likely, and only 7% said that they are very unlikely to do so. So, there's certainly I would say a decent percentage of freight
Right.
forwarders that are at least, open or at least planning to do some kind of investment in AI. But again, here the large freight forwarders are much more likely, as you highlighted, to invest in AI than the smaller ones. If you go to the next slide, I think it shows kind of where are they looking to, in what areas of their operations have they implemented or plan to implement AI in the coming year. And, freight pricing and quoting kind of topped the list there for freight forwarders, with 39% of the respondents selecting it. And this was followed by documentation automation and warehousing and inventory, management. Um, I think what this tells me, and what I've heard from some of the early adopters and others, is that they're looking for the low-hanging fruit opportunities, and those low-hanging fruit opportunities tend to be areas where you're trying to get move away from paper-based processes. You're trying to get away from very repetitive um, manual type of processes. So when you look at something like freight pricing and quoting, right, that's something that, if you've got the right capabilities, the right data and analytics and everything else, you can automate that. You can use AI to streamline and automate, that task. Same thing with documentation automation, right? You bring in the data, that data can then, you can then leverage AI and other tools to automatically create, that documentation without having to, incur much, human oversight or labor, to do that. So to me, I think it's encouraging that, a decent percentage of the population here, the survey respondents, are looking at AI, because it tells me like they're keeping the pulse on this trend. It doesn't surprise me that, again, that they're probably a little bit conservative, right? Trying to
Right.
figure out where, because there is, we've got to be honest, there's a lot of hype, right? I think a lot of folks
Yeah.
have been burned in the past, right? If you remember blockchain, right? Blockchain was going to cure cancer and everything
Oh
in
boy.
between,
Yeah.
right? If you go back even further back, RFID was going to completely transform supply chain and logistics. So, there's the tendency in the industry to, create a lot of hype around technologies. I think AI is certainly different. I think the hype is warranted. But again, like everything else, there's a cycle that these technologies go through. And relatively speaking, there's a segment of AI that's well established and being used today. And then there's some of these newer technologies that are still um, uh, in the early days. And I think companies are trying to figure out how to use them.
Yeah. And what I took from this graph is that at the end of the day, no one wants to do all these manual, repetitive, mundane tasks. They just much rather focus on key strategic initiatives within their organization and leave the automation to AI. And by the way, when you were going back, when you were referencing RFID blockchain, that was funny. There was a quote that came through in the webinar chat from James, and it says, "I tend to think most people still want cutting edge, but don't want to be on the bleeding edge."
I
I
love it.
absolutely love that, James. I will be using it in my regular vocabulary from here on in. Um, but yeah, and so we've reached officially point number 5, which is at the end of the day, why is digitization imperative for freight forwarders and logistics service providers? So this is cutting to the chase. Why does it even matter? It sounds great. It seems like it's going to do everything and more. But what's really at stake for the freight forwarders if they don't make the leap? That's the question. Is this and I'm asking directly Gus and Adrian, is this a yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. It's a nice to have further down the road, or is this the oh my God, my car is hanging at the edge of the cliff. If I don't lean back or do something about it, I'm going to fall right off. What are your takes on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's going to become increasingly difficult, and it's already is increasingly difficult to compete and be successful and be able to meet customer expectations if you're not, you know, continuing to focus on moving up the digital transformation curve. Because we all know that the pace of this industry is accelerating in terms of all the change. And there's just a variety of different factors that are really serving as a catalyst for this. And we kind of highlight some of those in the report. Certainly, I referenced earlier kind of the shifting trade policies and regulations, right? So we've got, right now you can't go a day without reading about what's going on in the world of tariffs, what's going on with, free trade agreements, and perhaps renegotiating that. We did with de minimis, right? For those that are in e-commerce and what impact that will have. I mean, when you look at all these potential changes, I mean, they'll require logistics service providers to gather and verify, more detailed information, right, for each shipment, right? So more data gathering, more data collection that's going to be involved. They'll also probably need to adjust their pricing structure, right? Because now shipments that maybe were previously exempt from duties may now incur tariffs. So there's all sorts of implications here. And if you're still managing this with spreadsheets, or manually or with paper. You can't scale your business and your operations by throwing more people on it. And that gets to the next, catalyst because the reality is that there's fewer and fewer people available out there. Like the
Right.
labor pool is shrinking, right? There's labor constraints out there. We did a survey with our Endigo community. So this is a separate research that we did back in December of 2024, and this is for shippers, but 58% of them said that finding and hiring qualified blue collar workers, so these are, drivers, warehouse workers, and alike, was either very challenging or challenging. And then the same thing was true with white collar workers, right? Finding white collar workers, so these are analysts, planners, was not any easier, right? So with 50% of the respondents saying that, it was either very challenging or challenging too. If you look at the 3PL industry, logistics service providers in general, if you look at the 2023 third-party logistics study conducted by Dr. Langley over at Penn State University, um, 56% of the 3PLs that they surveyed said that labor shortages impacted their supply chain operations. And many see this quote unquote, talent crisis as a long-term issue, with 29% of the 3PLs saying they believe there is a permanent shift. And and that's not surprising because when you look at just the demographics and population changes, I mean, almost two-thirds of the world's countries are below the 2.1 replacement fertility level. That is the level of fertility at which a population exactly replaces itself from one generation to the next. And here in the US, for example, the fertility level was 1.7 in 2022, according to the World Bank, and it's been below that 2.1 level for more than 50 years. So the bottom line is that, I mean, I'm a Generation X guy, right? So every generation since, baby boomers was the last growing
Shrinking.
one, right? But every
Yeah.
generation since has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's why you're seeing a big drive towards using robots in the warehouse, for example, using robotic process automation and software, and of course, AI, right? These are all things that are driving that. So the bottom line is that the labor shortage problem is not a temporary issue, right? This problem has been decades in the making, and it's here to stay. So I think that's a critical long-term, challenge. And then I think like we've already talked about this before, right? Technology is truly becoming a competitive differentiator for logistics service providers and freight forwarders. In the survey, I don't know if we have a chart for this, but 90% of the shippers that we surveyed in November 2024 said that technological capabilities are either extremely important or very important when they're evaluating and selecting their freight forwarding and 3PL partners. So again, your prospective customers are placing a high value on the technological capabilities of their potential freight forwarding partners. So again, that could be the deciding factor between a prospective customer working with you or working with your competition.
There you go. So that's putting you squarely within the act right now. You're at a crossroads, because of all the factors that you've mentioned. The time to do it is now. Gus, what's your take?
Alfred, I think I completely agree with with Adrian. The way I put it whenever we have this meetings is like, if you want to move into the automation process, you need to start with digitization. Like there's no other way, and the reality is like digitization is going to be the answer to be more agile, to be able to respond faster when a pilot is needed. And let me give you a quick example because I think we're running, like with the time, like something that happens recently, there was some changes with customs requirements. I don't know if you remember that.
Right.
So for Magaya customs compliance customers, we're able to convert type 86 entries to informal entries instead of changing everything manual. So this is like I mentioned when I say like whenever we digitize your operation, you will be able to automate that operation. So if you don't have a process like this, everything will become manual. And when it's manual, mistakes can happen. And mistakes in logistics are, fairly
Expensive. They're really expensive. Yeah, no, that was when everything happened with the Type 86. Talk about being nimble. That happened, at the turn of a dime, the everything that Magaya did. So I kind of want to have my mic drop moment, and it's going to happen at the next slide, and I'm going to read it verbatim. This was also, as one executive put it, we have some logistic partners who have the best in class technology while others lag behind with limited visibility and delays in messaging. Guess what? We're actively working to rid ourselves of the latter. And that right there says it all. We're going to go ahead and launch a poll question right now. And then right after that, we're going to spin quickly into the Q&A portion. So the question, and you should see it right now appear on your screen, how would you rate the current digital transformation progress in the freight forwarding industry? Now, you can pick, is it rapid digital advancement and innovation, steady progress with room for growth? That's kind of your middle of the ground, or slow adoption, critical improvements are needed. And we're going to give you a couple of seconds here because we do want to get to the Q&A portion. So if you see it on your screen, go ahead and start answering so we can take a look at the results. Yeah, it's crazy to think how quickly everything is moving. Did you hear that Microsoft just announced that they have a new topological supercomputer? That was interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's yeah, quantum pushing the envelope on quantum computing. So um yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing to see. I mean, I started my career in semiconductors way back when, and it's amazing to see. You had Moore's law in semiconductors, but back when in the 90s, the state of silicon chips and where we are today, and it's just
Right.
mind-boggling, the amount of progress that has been made in, relatively short period of time.
Right. No, it's insane. And I always have this conversation with my nieces. It's funny. I was like, when I was young, I had a beeper. They're like, what the heck is a beeper? I was just like, think of it as text messaging, but with like a stone and chisel. That's how bad it is. Okay, so I think we have the majority of respondents, and I do want to move into the Q&A portion. So the results are actually right in the middle. It says there's steady progress with room for growth. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that aligns with with what I said that in as part of my opening comments. I mean, I think that we've certainly seen some progress over the years with digitization in the industry, but probably slower than I would have expected, and definitely with room for growth. So yeah, I'm not surprised by these results.
Beautiful. Okay. Let's go into the Q&A portion because we are kind of running up on time and we want to be cognizant. So the first one that we have is from James. James, thank you for your quote again. And it says there are plenty of small players in the freight forwarder market. Is this lagging data really indicative of the say top 10, 15 freight forwarders? What do you guys think? Gus, Adrian, this one's open. Whichever wants to get it can get it.
I'm reading the question, Alfred. If you want to go, Adrian.
I didn't quite catch the
Yeah,
question.
me neither. That's what I was looking for. It. Can you repeat it, Alfred?
Sure, there are plenty of small players in the freight forwarder market.
Mhm.
Is this lagging data really indicative of the, say, top 10, 15 freight forwarders? What do you guys think?
Like when you're referring to data, you mean the data that these freight forwarders are getting?
Well, that's a good question. James, if you can provide some clarity, I'm going to move on to the next one. And then if you can contextualize that for it, we'll go ahead and we'll answer it. We have one from Dave, and it says carrier tech is just as critical to enable freight forwarders' capabilities to fully integrate seamlessly to shippers. Now, this one is actually more of a statement, but do you guys agree with the statement where they're saying that essentially, if I get this right, Dave, you can be super digitally advanced, but if the carrier technology is lagging behind, you're really not going to stand a chance because you're still kind of handcuffed to their technology. What's your take on this? This is actually a really good one.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, I think, that there's the classic line, right? That when it comes to supply chain, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And we talked a little bit about, the importance of data quality and connectivity, earlier. So yes, I mean, I think this is where, it truly takes a village, right? It truly takes the entire community to elevate, the state of providing real-time visibility and data quality, as part of this. So this is where, again, all stakeholders need to communicate and collaborate, with one another. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think, if you look at that from a shipper standpoint, I work with a lot of shippers. That quote that you talked about before, Alfred, that your mic drop one, right? Hey,
Yeah,
we're looking, these are our expectations from a technological standpoint. Those that don't meet it, we're looking to wean ourselves off of them. I think that holds true for them as well, right? Whether it's their logistics partners, whether it's their carriers, whether it's their parts suppliers, they're looking across their whole entire network, to really work with partners that not only can provide the parts, the materials, the service that they're looking for at the service level that they want, but also the data that they need and want, as well. Easier said than done. But yes, I mean, I think that's where, um, we talk a lot about the importance of collaboration in this industry. And I think historically we haven't walked the talk. But this is a perfect area where, you truly need collaboration and trust and support of all the parties because, if only, you could be doing everything right as the freight forwarder, but if those that you're getting data from don't have the systems, don't have good data quality, practices in place, you're constrained by their capabilities.
beautiful. Okay. And I do have one other question that I want to ask before we move on to the next slide. And it's what are the top 5 shipper uses for real-time tracking besides that they just want to know? So this is an interesting question because it's essentially saying, hey, this real-time visibility is a nice bell or whistle to have on there. But aside from them just wanting to know where their shipment is there any value to it? So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, but so from my standpoint, I mean, it's really where they find the value is really through, nested visibility, right? So it's not only about, the shipment itself or what ship it's on or what airplane it's on, but it's really about all the details inside of it as well, right? What SKUs are in that shipment, right? So it's kind of this whole inventory in motion, perspective. And what they want that for because, particularly when you're talking about, ocean shipments that are, takes weeks to get there. A lot changes, right? Over the course of that week in terms of demand patterns, and other things. So by being able to have that visibility in terms of what inventory is actually coming in, when is it expected to arrive, that helps their internal planning processes in terms of perhaps changing allocations, in terms of where that order, where that inventory is going to go to. It might, require, in this day and age, you're seeing shipments being diverted to other ports,
Right.
for a variety of different reasons. So if that happens, to be able to replan. So really, a lot of the more sophisticated shippers really want that visibility to not only where's the ship, and when's it going to arrive, but also that more granular and rich information that is about what's the what's the inventory that's in there, what orders are attached to those particular items, because that's going to feed their planning. That continues to feed their planning engines, and more these days, it's about the need to more dynamically plan on an ongoing basis, and being able to have the most up-to-date information is what's going to enable them to be able to do their replanning more effectively.
Exactly. Having the foresight to be able to see. So we are getting a ton of questions. The only thing is we do want to be cognizant of time. We are going to reach out to every single person that submitted a question via email after the webinar. So you'll also be getting that. One last thing, moving on to point number 6, which is what are the main calls to action for freight forwarders? In other words, as soon as we disconnect from this call right now, Adrian and Gus, what should everyone that attended this webinar go ahead and start doing?
For me, it's three things. I mean, just as a way to summarize some of the things we talked about today. One is conduct a voice of the customer survey. I mean, obviously, you probably have, QBRs, quarterly business review meetings with your customers, and you might be getting some feedback that way. But I think doing a more formalized, perhaps even confidential, survey of customers, particularly as it relates to technology and their technology, feedback and expectations, might be valuable. And then be able to include their feedback, when setting your IT investment, priorities. So it's not only about, like I said before, it's not only about, prioritizing IT investments that align with your internal objectives, but also with those of your customer expectations and their requirements. I'd say secondly is, identify where you still have manual and paper-based processes. So I always tell folks, walk around your operations from the very beginning to the very end, and wherever you see, piles of paper, wherever you see associates having to type between different windows and different systems, plant red flags there. And wherever you see red flags, those are probably areas that, you should prioritize, because those are probably areas that can be automated, digitized, and streamlined in a more effective manner. And then the final piece is, don't wait for the perfect solution to get started. I think that it's always you can get stuck with analysis paralysis, right? Um, and I think the way to get started is really identify, you start small, identify a pain point, an area that you think you can start moving up the maturity curve. Work with trading partners that have a similar culture and mindset around continuous improvement, that have the technology that you need them to have to help you, and so forth. And get started and see where it takes you.
Beautiful. Perfection is the enemy of progress. That's what I've always said. Gus, your take?
Yes. I would like to add, as a consultant for strategic accounts and former account executive in the sales department, don't be afraid of technology. Like, send us an email, give us a call. We are here to walk you through this process, because there's nothing worse for anybody to make an uninformed decision. So we'll give you the tools, we will answer your questions, we will make sure if the technology that you're looking for is adequate for your company. And if it is, we will provide you with like everything that you need to make that step. So like I said, like Adrian says, don't wait for the perfect solution. Like, it doesn't exist. We call them unicorns. So they don't exist, but nowadays we can get you started And I like to bring the Pareto principle in this. If you fix 20% of your issues right now, it probably helps 80% of your operation. So keep that in mind, and we look forward to hear from you.
That's fantastic. There you go. Always reach out to help for experience that you may not have. And then on the second bullet point, the identify where you have manual processes. One also door prize that everyone's going to get as soon as this webinar is over. In addition, in the email, there's going to be a quiz, which is your digital maturity quiz. It's fantastic. And I don't say that because I designed it myself, but it'll have a couple of questions on there regarding your operations where you can then see at the end of the day, hey, are you moving in the right direction? Are you lagging behind some of your peers? Or are you way ahead of the game? So I encourage you, check your email. It's going to come in there. It's a free reference and guide, and it'll have all the things to kind of put these 3 bullet points into place. With that being said, we're at time. I wanted to thank Adrian from Adelante SCM, Gus from Magaya. Thank you both so much. I also wanted to thank the behind the scenes crew for everything that they've done. And thank you to all of our attendees for coming. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. Say goodbye, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. Take care.